If you've ever camped somewhere remote, truly remote, miles from the nearest road, this story is going to stay with you. I want you to think about the last time you felt completely alone in the dark. Not the kind of alone where you're in your bedroom with the lights off. I mean the kind where there's nothing around you but trees and silence, and the understanding that if something went wrong, no one would hear you. That's where I was. And what happened out there changed the way I think about the woods forever. It was late August, 3 years ago. Me and my buddy Colt had driven 4 hours into the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois to camp for the weekend. We weren't beginners. We'd done this a dozen times, packed light, hiked in about 6 miles from the trailhead and set up camp near a creek off the marked path. No other campers nearby. That was the whole point. We wanted quiet. The first evening was perfect. We made a fire, ate, talked until maybe midnight, then crawled into our tents. The creek was running soft in the background, the kind of sound that puts you to sleep within minutes. I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed. I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of Colt unzipping my tent. He crouched down and said quietly, not panicked, just serious, "Hey, come look at something." I pulled on my boots and stepped outside. The fire had died down to orange coals. Colt pointed toward the tree line on the far side of the creek, maybe 40 feet from us. There was a light, not a flashlight beam. More like a soft, consistent glow, yellowish, almost like a lantern. It was still, not moving, just sitting there between the trees. "How long has it been there?" I asked. "About 10 minutes, he said. I woke up and saw it through the mesh." We watched it for another 5 minutes. It didn't move, didn't flicker. I told myself it was another camper, probably set up late, probably had a lantern hanging inside their tent. That made sense. That was the rational answer. So we went back to sleep. In the morning, I crossed the creek to check. There was no tent, no fire ring, no footprints in the soft mud along the bank, and there would have been footprints. The ground over there was wet and dark. If someone had been standing there, we'd have seen the marks. There was nothing. Colt and I looked at each other and didn't say much. We made coffee, packed up a little tighter than usual, and told ourselves it was probably some kind of reflection. A cell tower light through the trees, maybe, something logical. We stayed the second night anyway. That was our mistake. Around 9 that evening, we started hearing something across the creek. Not footsteps, something else. Dragging. Like something heavy being pulled slowly across dry leaves. It would go for a few seconds, then stop, then start again. This happened 4 or 5 times over about 20 minutes. Colt grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. The beam caught the trees, the shadows between them, the glint of the creek, nothing else. But the sound had stopped the second the light clicked on. And I mean the exact second. Like whatever was making it knew. We built the fire up higher. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both stopped pretending it was nothing. At around midnight, I needed to get up and use the bathroom. I walked maybe 30 feet from camp into the trees, far enough for privacy. I had my flashlight. I did what I needed to do and turned back toward camp, and I stopped. Because there was a man standing at the edge of our campsite. He wasn't hiding. He was just standing there at the far ring of firelight facing our tents. I couldn't see his face. He had on dark clothing and he was completely still. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. For about 10 seconds I just stood there in the dark, watching him, my heart slamming against my chest so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I turned my flashlight on and called out, louder than I meant to, "Hey, hey." He turned and walked into the woods, not running, walking, slow and deliberate, like he wasn't afraid of me at all. I ran back to camp and woke Colt up. We didn't debate it, we packed. It was midnight, pitch dark, 6 miles to the trailhead, and we packed everything we could grab in about 4 minutes and started hiking. That hike back was the longest of my life. We moved fast, flashlights up, not talking. The trail was uneven and the shadows pushed in close on both sides. Every time a branch moved, every time the wind shifted, every time a sound came from somewhere I couldn't place, my stomach dropped. Colt was ahead of me and I kept my light angled backward, checking behind us every 30 seconds. About 2 miles from the trailhead, we stopped at a fork to check the map. And while we were standing there, Colt grabbed my arm. He pointed his light down the left trail, not the one we were taking. About 60 feet away, just at the edge of the beam, was a figure, standing still. Same dark clothing, same posture. We ran. We didn't stop running until we hit the trailhead parking lot and got to the truck. Colt's hands were shaking when he tried to get the key in the door. We locked the doors, drove out to the main road, and kept driving for 20 minutes before we even spoke. We never found out who that man was. We reported it to a ranger station the next day. They took our information, said they'd check it out. We never heard anything back. What I keep coming back to, what genuinely keeps me up at night sometimes, is the way he moved. When I hit him with my flashlight and called out, he didn't startle. He didn't freeze or look confused or say anything. He just turned and walked away, completely calm, like he'd done this before, like being caught was just a minor inconvenience. He knew those woods, he knew them in the dark, and he'd been watching us long enough to know exactly where we'd be. I don't camp anymore, not like that. Not remote, not off-trail, not without other people nearby. People tell me I'm overreacting. Maybe I am. But I think about that man standing at the edge of our firelight, facing our tents, completely still. Most people think the danger in the woods is getting lost. I used to think that too, until I realized the thing I should have been afraid of wasn't the forest. It was the other campers. I didn't plan on going alone. My buddy Derek was supposed to come with me. We'd been talking about this trip for months. Pisgah National Forest, North Carolina. 4 days, no cell service, no noise. Just us, the trees, and whatever peace we could find after the year we'd both had. Then Derek's mom had a stroke 2 days before we were supposed to leave, and I told him to go be with his family. I'd make the trip solo. I'd done it before. It felt fine. I drove out on a Thursday morning and reached the trailhead around noon. The ranger station was a small brown building at the edge of the parking lot, half hidden by overgrown pines. I signed the trail register, grabbed my permit, and the ranger, a quiet older man with a salt and pepper beard, handed me a laminated map without much conversation. I asked him if the campsite at Miller Creek was busy this time of year. He shrugged and said it depended on the weekend crowd. Said Thursday was usually quiet. He was right. When I reached the Miller Creek site around 3 in the afternoon, I was completely alone. I set up my tent, filtered some water from the creek, cooked a simple meal over my camp stove. The woods were calm, birds, wind, the creek moving over rocks. By the time the sun dropped behind the ridge and the temperature fell, I was in my sleeping bag reading with a headlamp. Nothing felt wrong. That's the part I keep coming back to. Nothing felt wrong. I woke up at some point in the night to the sound of another campsite being set up. That alone wasn't strange. Hikers sometimes roll in late. I could hear tent stakes being driven, gear being moved around, low voices. 2 people, maybe 3. The site nearest to mine was about 40 yards through the trees, just close enough that I could hear activity without making out specific words. I checked my watch. It was 2:14 in the morning. Late but not unheard of. I told myself it was nothing and went back to sleep. In the morning, I introduced myself. There were 2 of them, men, probably late 30s. One introduced himself as Cal, the other said his name was Ruddy. They were polite, friendly, even. Cal had this big, easy smile, the kind of guy who seems immediately likable without you knowing quite why. Ruddy was quieter, nodded more than he talked. They said they'd driven up from South Carolina after a long work week and just wanted to decompress. We talked for maybe 10 minutes over coffee. I offered them some instant oatmeal. Cal took it. Ruddy didn't. Nothing about them alarmed me. That afternoon, I did a solo day hike up to a ridgeline overlook about 4 miles out. I was up there for maybe 2 hours, ate lunch, watched a pair of hawks circle the valley below. When I came back down and was maybe half a mile from camp, I stopped to filter water at a small stream crossing. And that's when I saw it. My pack. sitting open on a rock 30 feet off the trail. I stood there for a second, genuinely confused. I had left my pack in my tent. I was sure of it. I walked over slowly and looked inside. Everything was still there: food bag, first aid kit, extra layers. Nothing was missing. But it had clearly been moved, opened, and left out in the open like whoever did it wanted me to find it exactly like this. My first instinct was that I'd made a mistake, that maybe I'd left it there earlier without thinking. But I knew I hadn't. I remembered zipping my tent closed. I remembered leaving the pack inside. So I did what I think most people would do. I told myself there was probably some explanation, and I kept walking back to camp. Cal and Ruddy were at their site, fire pit going, laughing about something. They waved when they saw me. I waved back. I didn't say anything about the pack. That night I slept with my knife unclipped on the ground next to my head. I told myself I was being paranoid. I almost convinced myself. Around midnight I heard it. Movement. But not footsteps, not someone walking. It was the zipper on my tent vestibule, moving slowly in a way that could only be deliberate. Someone was trying to open it quietly. My whole body went cold. I grabbed the knife and I forced myself to stay completely still, because every part of me knew that if I made a sound, whatever came next would come faster. The zipper stopped. Silence. Then I heard whispering, two voices, low and fast, like an argument being had at volume 0. It lasted maybe 15 seconds. Then nothing. Then the sound of someone moving away through the underbrush. Not toward the trail. Into the woods behind the site. I lay there until I saw gray light coming through the tent fabric. When I finally got up, I broke camp in under 12 minutes. I rolled my sleeping bag without stuffing it properly. I didn't eat. I just moved. The fastest I could without running, because something in me understood that running would feel like prey. Cal and Ruddy's tent was empty when I passed their site. No gear, no fire pit remnants, no sign they'd been there at all. The ground was scraped clean. Not packed up and gone, scrubbed. I'd worked enough outdoor jobs to know what a campsite looks like when someone leaves in a hurry and what it looks like when someone wipes it. This was wiped. I made it to the trailhead in just over 2 hours. My car was the only one in the lot. I drove directly to the ranger station. I told the ranger everything. He listened the whole way through without interrupting. When I finished, he turned to his computer and typed for a while. Then he told me something that I have not stopped thinking about since. He said the Miller Creek site had been flagged 3 times in the past 2 years. Once for a hiker who reported a ransacked tent. Once for an abandoned vehicle with no hiker ever found. And once, and he said this carefully, like he was measuring the weight of it, for a solo man who came out of the woods 2 days early, reported 2 men matching similar descriptions, and said he'd woken up to find her emergency whistle was missing. Just the whistle, nothing else. He took my statement. He said he'd pass it along. He gave me a case number. I drove home without stopping. I don't know what Cal and Ruddy were planning. I don't know if they've been caught. I looked up that case number 2 weeks later and got no information. No updates. Nothing. What I know is this: they chose me because I was alone. They spent a full day building trust before they made a move. And whatever that move was, they had it planned before they ever said hello. The woods didn't scare me. They never really did. It's the people in them who do. I've been camping since I was 9 years old. My dad had this rule: no phones, no generators, no excuses. You sleep on the ground, you eat what you cook over a fire, and you earn your rest. So by the time I was 26, I wasn't someone who scared easily in the woods. I knew the sounds. I knew the rhythms. I knew the difference between an animal moving through brush and the wind just messing with your head. What happened to me in the Shawnee National Forest in southern Illinois 3 years ago, I still can't fully explain it. And I've tried. Believe me, I have tried. It was early October. Perfect camping weather, cold enough at night to need a real sleeping bag, but still clear enough during the day that the tree line looked like it was on fire with color. I went alone, which I'd done dozens of times before. A long weekend. 3 days, 2 nights, roughly 14 miles of trail I'd partially mapped out myself. The first day was everything I needed it to be. Quiet. Still. I covered about 6 miles before setting up camp near a creek, cooked some rice and beans over the fire and fell asleep by 9. No problems, no bad feelings, nothing. The second day is where it starts. I woke up around 6 in the morning and immediately noticed my food bag had been moved. I'd hung it from a tree branch the night before, about 15 feet up, tied off the way you're supposed to, and it was still hanging. Still tied, but it was swinging. Gently, like it had just been disturbed. There was no wind. I told myself it was a bear or a raccoon that had climbed up and knocked it. I checked for prints in the soft ground near the tree and found some, but they weren't clean enough to identify. Smeared, like something or someone had shuffled their feet through them. I let it go. I broke camp and kept moving. Around midday, I came across something that stopped me cold. There was a campsite, not a designated one, just a flat clearing near a ridge, and it looked like it had been used very recently. Fire pit with ash that still had a faint warmth when I held my hand over it. A ring of logs arranged as seats, and hung between 2 trees tied with paracord was a tarp shelter. Neat, deliberate, but no one was there. No gear, no pack, no food, just the structure and the dead fire. I told myself it was another hiker who'd packed out that morning, completely reasonable. I kept going. By late afternoon, I was another 3 miles in, and I set up my camp on a low ridge with a good view of the terrain below. Made my fire, ate, and sat there watching the sky go dark. And somewhere around 8 o'clock, I saw a light. Down in the valley below me, maybe half a mile out, there was a flashlight or a lantern, something moving through the trees. Slowly. Not like someone hiking with purpose, more like someone searching. Moving a few feet, stopping, moving again. I watched it for 20 minutes. It never left the same general area. Just moving, stopping, moving, stopping. I didn't sleep well that night. In the morning, I made a decision I've questioned ever since. Instead of heading back the way I came, I went down into that valley. I told myself I just wanted to see if there was another campsite there. Maybe someone had gotten hurt and needed help. What I found was not a campsite. It was a vehicle. A dark green pickup truck parked on a narrow dirt access road I hadn't even known existed, hidden almost entirely by overgrown brush on both sides. The truck had no plates. The windows were fogged from the inside. And the cab was filled, and I mean completely filled, with Ziploc bags, plastic bins, folded tarps, and lengths of rope bundled in neat coils. I stood there at the edge of that road for what felt like a full minute, not moving. Then the driver's door opened. A man got out. White male, maybe mid-40s, heavy build, wearing a canvas work jacket and mud-caked boots. He looked at me with this expression that I can only describe as evaluation. Like he was calculating something. He didn't seem startled that I was there. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me, then looked at my pack, then looked back at my face. He asked me if I was lost. I said no. I said I'd seen a light the night before and came to check. He said it was just him. Said he was doing some land scouting. Didn't say for what. I asked if he had the access permit for the vehicle because I knew motorized access on that trail system required one. He smiled at that, not a warm smile, and said he had everything he needed. Something in my body made the decision before my brain did. I told him I had to keep moving, turned around, and started walking. Not running, walking, because running felt like giving him something. I heard his door close behind me. I didn't hear the truck start. I walked for 40 minutes without stopping. Every time the trail curved and I lost sight of what was behind me, my stomach dropped. I kept my hand on the emergency whistle clipped to my shoulder strap. I didn't know what I would do with it. I just needed to be holding something. When I finally hit the trailhead parking lot, I sat in my car with the doors locked for 10 minutes before I could get myself to start the engine. I reported the truck to the ranger station on my way out. I described the location, described the man, described what I saw inside that cab. The ranger, A woman in her 50s who had clearly heard everything, wrote it all down, nodded, and told me they'd look into it. I never heard anything back. I checked the local news for weeks. Nothing. Here's what I've never been able to let go. When I described the contents of that truck, the bags, the bins, the rope, the ranger didn't ask me what I thought was in them. She didn't ask me to clarify. She just kept writing, like she already knew. Like this wasn't the first time someone had come out of those woods describing exactly that truck. I don't go camping alone anymore. I know that sounds like the fear talking, and maybe it is. But I also know what I saw. I know what was in that cab. And I know that whoever that man was, he wasn't scouting land. He was using it. For what, I hope I never find out. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button right now. If you're new here, subscribe. And if you've got a story of your own, something that happened to you or someone you know, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Drop a comment below telling me, would you still camp after hearing this? Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.